Welcome. Thank you for joining Weaving Stories of Your Well-Being. Today we have Wading in Weeds, and we wanted to share a little story for you. This is all brought to you by PureEsperanza. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to bringing forth consciousness while educating body, mind, and soul in the art of well-being. And today we have with us our dear friend, Balaka Ghosal, and she is not only the CEO and founder of Green Writer LLC, but also a board member of PureEsperanza. And by day, she may be a copywriter, but she is a phenomenal storyteller with such wisdom interwoven into not only the stories, but life and the journey of life. So we are so thankful to be here with Balaka. And Balaka, I'm going to
Thank you so much.
just, again, thank you so much. And so thankful that you are here with us and sharing your gift. So you had mentioned, and we had been talking about just different parts of our gardens. Yours is obviously quite more extensive than mine because I only have potted gardens this year, but I know how much you love the garden. And we started this as kind of a 3-part series with the garden. So last month it was about blooming into bounty, and now we have the second part, wading into weeds, and just being able to look a little bit more closely at different aspects of what that means. And we had been talking about the nurturing of garden last year, and then also that creating the bounty, but alongside of that, we have the persistence, as every gardener knows, of weeds and how they just keep coming up. And so, you know, as gardeners or anyone working with plants outdoors, we know that, you know, we have to ask ourselves, do we just yank them all out? What are weeds? Are they bad? Do we feel like there is, you know, no other way that we can make use of them? What is their purpose? And for many of us, or, you know, even in our culture, we've been indoctrinated to be like, oh, perfectly manicured, pull all the weeds out and, you know, have it just perfectly trimmed and manicured, you know. But there may be another balance, another solution to co-live with these plants and even possibly find out what might be the purpose. And I know that we had spoken about a story and one that might exemplify this beautifully. And
yes, well, when it comes to weeds, I mean, it's a nightmare for many gardeners, for farmers, and it's a nuisance. But if you have read the story of Westlandia, you know what the other possibilities could be. Westlandia is about a boy named Wesley, a kind of a weird boy with, you know, strange but good interests, but somehow cannot make friends with his peers. So at school, he's reading books, he's borrowing books from the library, and teased a lot by the peers in his neighborhood and even at school. So for the science fair project, he's thinking what to do. He's reading up, you know, delving into books to find the right kind of projects for himself. And then at night, he sees with a storm, a bunch of seeds come and fall into his parents' backyard. And he was curious. And soon the seeds sprouted and there were like plants growing very tall and fast, like the jack and the beanstalks, you know, growing by the inches. And the neighbors, they were so worried that nothing's being done about it. They're growing their tomatoes and beans, and they threw all of those little, you know, tormenting weeds out very soon, right at the beginning. You know, they're always alert about it. And when they told Wesley, who was hanging out in the backyard most of the time through summer without any friends, they said, hey, boy, get those weeds out. And he said, I'm cultivating them. That's my science fair project. And they're like, what? No, pull them out. And he said, I'm curious to see what comes out of it. And soon big buds were coming and purple, bright purple flowers. I said, oh, interesting. He picked them up and started playing with it, and the purple color, that started oozing, he started doing something. Then came the fruits, purple fruit juice. Then he wasn't interested in the cereal and milk in the kitchen. He had, his fresh local breakfast right there in the backyard. And then with that, next came the stalks, that became reeds, with which he kind of got into an engineering project. I don't want to give all the details out. It's amazing how the illustrator, created that impact on the readers with his amazing artwork. With the reeds, he made an entire kingdom. The leaves also got to work. So he used all the body parts of that weed and got his nutrition, got his shelter, and he even started making things that he was selling. And that's when the neighborhood boys who got all the pleasure in teasing him lined up to buy his product. Then they said, can I work for you? And it's again a beautiful, and he didn't have any vengeance to say, no, I'm not going to let them in. No, he was a curious, open-minded person. Just like he welcomed these weeds, he welcomed these people in, and soon it became a nation, a kingdom that he named Westlandia after himself, like Wesley and Westlandia. So this is a tiny microcosm, and also the parents were supportive all through. They were curious, looking out from the window like, yeah, okay, so he's busy, he's happy, because they were always worried, our child doesn't have any friends, is he going to be happy, what will he do through summer, what was his science project going to be? Very caring, considerate parents, but also allowing parents who were letting the child explore. And the end result was an amazing, not only an experiment, it almost became a lifestyle, a wisdom for him and his friends. So whenever I look at weeds, and you're right, I don't have a very big backyard, but maybe a little larger than yours, and I'm trying to change it into permaculture. And every time I'm having that Westlandia moment,
Yeah.
Mine is a wasteland right now almost, because it has so many weeds, but each time I'm working, Wesley is my inspiration. That how do we look at weeds, and where not do we welcome it? But I think you have a great insight, because you were off the grid and in the natural setting you did parenting.
Yes. Well, first of all, that story is awesome, and I love how stories inspire us, and that's really one of the reasons that we started this series, because there's so much that we receive from the characters in a story, how they serve as archetypes, how they speak to parts of our soul or our life journey. And so we have so many different levels, from all three holistic aspects of body, mind, and soul, and beyond. So that really gives us that food for thought, pun intended in this case too. But I know that a couple of things that this story really spoke to was along the ideas of, when something is welcome or we see it as being invasive. We heard that part of the story in terms of how, the neighbor saw it as invasive. It was, weeds coming, and, he was encouraged to pull the weeds out. And yet the welcoming part was how Wesley faced it, and how his parents gave that room, that space, right? That breath to grow into this possibility. Right? So there was this welcoming piece to it. Another part is, how we can see, Wesley, similar to the weeds, persistent. He kept kept to what he was doing. And that was really beautiful, despite the fact that he wasn't encouraged by, maybe a cultural norm around him. And then the persistency of the weeds, they kept coming, they came in a swoop of seeds that dropped. And then we have, what is under control, how we think that we're controlling something, and yet, nature is providing it, and it's natural, and it's the natural order. And so then where is that balance between what we presume is making it under control, and then, what is actually the natural order? So we have a couple of different points here that I would love to hear more about, because I think you also had mentioned, some of your experiences with something's going on right there in your own town, with some natural native weeds. And, we call them weeds. And so right away there's a, a connotation of it being negative, but, some of the weeds that we have around us are so powerful. For instance, simple dandelion. Dandelion greens is really one of the most healing types of foods we can eat. And, our native indigenous ancestors knew that, but, not so much today, and so there's so many.
With weed killers, I think we have wiped out even the positive, good weeds that, naturally grow. So yes, my personal experience is interesting, because when I came as an immigrant, I was learning up the mode of gardening that everyone else is doing. And when I became a school teacher, a science teacher, and I was learning from my other science coordinator, and I became part of the Texas Master Naturalist group, and I started taking lessons from experts, and my outlook changed that, hey, these weeds have been here with a purpose. And what is a weed after all? If we really sit down to define weed, we first target the milkweed, right? Because weed is in the name. And the pristine neighborhoods with all these mansion-like houses, this is not tolerated. The scraggly, tall weeds with some flower on the top. Well, what about the rest of it? We don't want it. Let it go. Well, that way, all the monarch butterflies migrating from Minnesota or from Canada down south to Mexico, and then again making a trip back, not the same generation, but almost like the grandchildren making a trip back. They don't find, it's like food deserts, now with so many neighborhoods coming up, and the natural milkweed is gone, which has the juice in it, the bitter juice that gives the caterpillars the ability to give tummy ache to the birds. So the birds have learned not to eat the caterpillar. So it's a real network and planning of nature. And we're destroying it. And so they kind of just drop dead, or the butterflies cannot breed because the milkweeds are gone. So I started planting milkweeds everywhere. I said, oh, I love the flowers, But we got a letter from the homeowners association. A tough letter, so you need to get all the weeds out of your front garden. So I called them up, and I had a very pleasant, it didn't get difficult, but they were kind of persistent in the way that milkweed is a weed, and they wouldn't define weed. They have nothing to do with anything. They just, we want it out. I said, why? It's my front garden, and your office is somewhere else. Why are you so worried? They said, you're bringing the house prices down in that neighborhood. I laughed because I didn't know I had so much control on the US economy, or, the local economy, of changing house prices with just a small tweak of planting or letting the milkweeds be there, because the milkweeds sprout up anyway. I don't pull them out. So with that little thing, I said, I have so much power. I never knew that. But they finally, with a lot of humor and my persistence as well, they permitted me to have them as many as I wanted in my backyard. So my backyard is developing with the Turk's cap and so many of them actually, that they're all growing in the backyard, the goldenrods and the
Yes.
spiderworts. So that's a habitat. And now when I look out, it looks like a weed garden. It looks like a bunch of weeds out there, but I see the beauty. And the new one that has come around, and that's when I remember Westlandia, is last month. I saw this and I did the Google reverse research, and I saw they were the Phyllanthus urinaria, strange name, but this Phyllanthus got many different types. And they're actually quite hard to get rid of. And they're one of the bad weeds that the gardening media talks about. But the good news, just like dandelions, they're amazing medicinal plants with tiny fruits under the leaf. I think I have one with me today right here. Where did it fall down? Probably. It's right here. It has seeds,
beautiful.
it's called flower leaf. Now it's wilted some because I got it about half hour ago. But it has seeds under its leaf,
If you could hold it up to the camera and then very still just for a minute. So yeah, I see. Oh, I see. So those are the little
underside, okay?
Yeah, little berries.
Yeah, my nails are like real gardener nails.
Yeah.
So these plants is good for kidney disease, malaria, diabetes, and liver disease. And it's used across the world by folk medicine people. So this is so valued. My whole outlook on them kind of changed. Yes. I'm going to just maybe keep one area where they can be,
right,
and not have them smother over other plants. So that's a new discovery, and I'm seeing it everywhere in Houston. When I drive across town to a friend's house, I'm seeing these come up, and she's saying, where did this come from? And I am smiling because just like in Wesley's, one midnight storm brought in this, and we had that Saudi Arabian sandstorm sweeping over, the whole Midwest, remember last year?
Yeah.
We don't know if such a storm picked up these seeds and brought them over to Houston. We don't know, but it is difficult when weeds really grow at that speed. But I am keeping that Wesley wisdom.
Yes, I love that.
So Wesley created Westlandia, and as I was joking that my garden looks like a wasteland, not wasteland, Westlandia. But the Wesley wisdom is, let's be curious in some place because it has a value to add, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't have that control that you talked about. I love that you said the confidence that, oh, I've taken all the weeds out and I'm good. I can relax. We cannot really relax because they'll keep sprouting out. So that I think it humbles us in a way that we really cannot put a final end to weeds. And it's also making us curious when we try to say, let's see if it's a, what value it has, whether it has.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think, going back just a moment to when you had talked about Wesley and how he inspired you because he was persistent about what he was doing. And, we even made that comparison of how weeds are persistent too, so similarly, both of them had that kind of resonating quality about them. And here you are inspired by the fact that he had that persistency, even the fact that you got that letter, you followed up, you spoke to them, they said, okay, the city, you said you can have them in your backyard kind of thing, and you have that out there, and you're sticking with that curiosity of wanting to know more about how they can be of value because you already sense that they are. And so you're going to allow for that to happen so that you can actually enjoy, what you discover from that process.
Yeah, and so even when I pull out a weed that please, maybe near a plant that I don't want the nutrition to be shared, I still appreciate. I said, if I had, like, hello weed, I'm talking to it, that if I had your kind of persistence, that, no matter what, no matter how many times I face adversity, I'll still shoot for the sunlight. If I had that persistence in me, I could have done a whole lot better with my life.
Yeah. I agree. I remember as a child, my mother having me pull out dandelions in the lawn, and, when they first started to come out, she'd be like, oh, there's one, and pull it out kind of thing. And I remember that I used to, do that as a child on my hands and knees and, try to find all of them and everything, and always was so astonished that there was always more coming, and it just didn't stop.
Like, didn't I pull them yesterday?
But there's a tenacity there, and I think I do have some of that in myself, and perhaps people that are watching can relate to a tenacity or persistency, and how we come wired, is an important piece to how we travel on the journey, and the fact that even though we're wired a certain way, we can still learn new programs, and we can still rewire and do other things. So for most of us, we've been indoctrinated into this idea that weeds are bad, and we should be rid of them. And along the same lines is the idea that when we have a negative thought or a negative feeling or negative energy, that it's bad, pull it out, get rid of it, rather than how do we find the value in it? So that consciousness shift of how do we find value in something so that we can cultivate or help it along or understand how it can help us. And that's a very important piece, to how we view those kinds of things that we as humans inevitably, undoubtedly experience. Nobody is free of that.
So, with negative experiences, we sometimes have a bitterness, but wisdom, life's learning also comes through the troubles that we face, right? So the negativity, if we really go, like you said, if we cultivate and go into like, where is it coming from? If we address that part with a solution, with not the spray solution, but yes. So with the right kind of approach and attitude, I think those becomes our stepping stone of further wisdom. And even in the garden, in the real weed terms, if we can cultivate them in a place where they are not smothering up the plants that we want to grow, we can balance. And like in a permaculture, that's what they are trying to do, right? Beneficial plants that bring the pollinators are weaved in between. They're given their spaces as long as they're not completely overpowering the crop that you want to grow. So that's a beautiful, I think, growing out, because when we think, oh, I got the negativity out and now I have the oomph to, handle things in the world. As soon as we are slightly unmindful, it comes back with a vengeance. Rather, handling it, like I said, cultivating, going to, being curious, and also giving it its space, balancing like an ecosystem and not beyond is good. My only thought, slightly different, would be that if it is really an invasive species that is causing harm, there are some such markers, like this is something you really need to get it out of your garden because it is harming. Then of course it's a different story. But with most local native plants, which we call weeds, are the not, invasive plants, species from other places,
Right. Yeah. And the other part that we had talked about was that, under the control of something, there's this illusion, just like the arrogance of thinking that, like you said, we have it all under control. Slightly different from what you had mentioned, it comes back with a vengeance. That's one way of looking at it. But regardless whether it's coming back like that or just the fact that it pops up again, sometimes we are hard on ourselves because we think oh, I mastered that, or oh, I already knew the lesson in that, and all of a sudden it's there. Maybe it looks a little bit different, but all of a sudden it's like glaring at you and you're like, oh, that's still the same lesson. I've always thought of it as like like when you're in school, you learn something and it builds a foundation, and then you learn something else in the next grade and you build on that. In a Waldorf school, the way I taught for many years, everything was leading up. Perhaps, for instance, an example would be like, okay, we did drawing letters, and then we actually went to writing letters. And at the same time that they were starting to learn how to knit, they started learning cursive. One thing led to another and was building up skills and capacities as it unfolded. And so similarly, I think we do learn lessons. And then I feel kind of like, not like someone's giving us a test, but I joke about it like a quiz or something, and it's ourselves. It's coming out of ourselves that now we have a new situation, and perhaps we do have that foundation because we learned it, but how well did we learn it? And maybe what seems like the stakes are a little bit higher now. So the ante's been upped, and now you have to like use a little bit more. And every time we do that, we expand. Our consciousness expands. Likewise, we're cultivation is expansion, because we're kind of refining and honing in, and then it's growing, even more bountiful for us. So that's, another beautiful part of that idea of, having it under control, and, just that humbling part that you spoke about. And that's such a powerful piece to all of it, that allows us to keep growing in capacities that we don't know today. We don't know today what's going to be, down the line, except that if we stay on this persistent path, and we're having these mindful practices, and we're cultivating, inevitably, that's what leads to our expansion. Yeah.
And it also doesn't allow overwhelm to take over.
Yes.
When we are battling weeds constantly, there is pain, there is this fear that, I may not be successful.
Yes.
And when we balance it, that, okay, it has a space, I'm only working on the other part. I'm just giving very easy examples because my backyard is not big, and I totally understand those who are dealing with a major weed problem anywhere, but still, given their situation as well, maybe the outlook, if we change that, it has its benefit of giving us some more courage to stay on and be persistent just as much as the weeds are.
Yes. And that, to me, I think is a tremendous value just there, that this little bit of awareness allows us to make transformations. Every time we shift that mindset, every time we reprogram and we expand our ability, our thinking, our consciousness, all of that leads us to this further evolution of ourselves, and the transformation of all of humanity. And so many things, that come to my mind. There are so many movements. There are, of course, as people that are doing permaculture, people that are doing biodynamics, people that are foraging, people that are looking at those natural medicines and wisdom all over again. And there's just movements about this, and native plants, indigenous plants, and, the value that they bring in how we live in harmony. And it really, beyond the physical aspect of all those things, it really allows us to learn in a way that's much more integrated holistically with body, mind, and soul, and how we cohabitate with one another.
Yes.
Yeah.
And meeting the life's purpose. I always feel that the weeds, the local plants, which are weeds, have been here way before we humans made settlements in this part of the world, or any part of the world. The weeds came before the humans, and they have a purpose of maintaining that ecosystem. So maybe we can weave into, and the aggressive agriculture, which we have always celebrated since we discovered the promise of seeds and how we can tweak and grow. That agriculture is now being questioned, that trend. And we're again looking at the wisdom of growing food in permaculture styles to get more abundance. It's not just
Yep.
being happy with less, it's just actually abundant, happy crops
Yes.
that grow to give us health.
Similarly, in biodynamics, it's all about enhancing the quality, the life force in the plant, so that, you know, how it's living and how we use it can actually regenerate, revitalize, be more nourishing. So not just the bounty of, you know, abundance in terms of how, you know, much produce, how much is produced, but
so
how
beautiful.
it actually, you know, is more nourishing, more nutrients inside of it.
Yeah, so if the plant is happy, the food it gives you is more nourishing than just how many grams of spinach did I have? Okay,
right.
Even if I have less, but I got it from a happy spinach plant.
Yes, yes. And as you know, we've talked about this before, and that's a whole other subject, but, you know, just even if we're doing organic today and, you know, being conscious about our food intake and, you know, that whole cycle of how it gets to us, where it comes from, you know, how it's cultivated or grown or brought to our table, you know, that all of those things, you know, we know that the soil is already so depleted in so many ways. And that's, like I said, a whole other subject. But, you know, the more we move towards that mindset, the more we move towards how do we find a balance? How do we find a harmony to be in cohabitation and value one another? That's so profound. From plants all the way to, you know, everyday interactions with all kinds of people. And certainly, you know, during COVID, and then in the United States, you know, during the presidential election that was recent or whatever, we saw all of that at the forefront, you know, the opportunities to understand how do we live among and with one another, and so valuable. So, you know, who would have known through plants, right? But it's,
it includes that whole ecosystem, you know, of like, the ecosystem is a word that's being used in, you know, in politics and in many other human dynamics within the community, human ecosystems. So yes, now it needs to extend and maybe include and find the balance in the wholeness, and not just they are the plants we want, they are the weeds, and here we are enjoying them. But you said a beautiful thing about how a plant that is nurtured well can give us more nutrition, higher quality nutrition. Unquantifiable, maybe.
Yes, but we're getting there. Soon we're going to be able to have those measurements too, to satisfy the individuals who are relying on science to do that for us, you know. But for those, you know, whoever you are out there and however you're receiving the information, you know, we're just appreciative to be able to have this opportunity to share some of these ideas and perhaps spur some of those inspirations or inklings in yourself to go out and explore, to be curious, to go ahead and think about, you know, what more you can learn in how to bring all of this into your life in a holistic way for your living. And with that, Balaka, we're here at our time, but so thankful we had this opportunity. You can find Balaka. Balaka, why don't you share with them, you know, some of the things, some of the platforms that you're on, and some of the work that you do, so that they can look for your writing, because it's just so beautiful. I know you did blogs for us as well on our website at PureEsperanza.org, but you can see some of her writing there. She had a beautiful series on the Ikigai. Ikigai, that's it. I always have trouble pronouncing.
Lifestyle choices. And well, you can go to my website, which is thegreenwriter.com, and there are the blogs. They show up, you know, just like weeds. They keep popping up there. And there are a couple of free giveaways there, which you can try. One is definitely on wellness, how to simplify life and have a you know, lesser of or more of a positive impact in your ecosystem, things that you can do every day. And it's not to, you know, not to market myself, it's just to add value to your own lifestyle and enrich yourselves. And I write some on Medium as well. So those are the three main, you know, areas. And share your thoughts and your experience with weeds down below, and we will also learn from you. I'm looking
Yes,
forward
absolutely.
to that.
And I think that's actually where we first met. It was through reading one of your Medium articles on recycling. So
Yes,
you have
yes.
a vast array of writing on all kinds of environmental and green types of subject matter. So I just really love that all around.
Thank you.
And you can find the nonprofit organization PureEsperanza on our website at pureesperanza.org. You can also find us on the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can connect on LinkedIn as well. We're always interested in speaking to other individuals and other organizations that are also interested in the consciousness movement and in a holistic well-being, body, mind, and soul, as being the foundational part that connects everything and all of us with all of life, and in so many different ways. So we're thankful.
You add so much value. Your videos, everyday videos, your posts, if you follow Pure Esperanza on Facebook, you will see it's energizing. It is looking at the good side of life. And we have a little bit of that in all of us, there is some sunshine coming in, and Esperanza is always willing
thank you.
able
Thank you so much.
to pull that out for us to see.
Thank you. Thank you. Not every day is an easy journey. Some days those steps and treads feel heavier or awkward, or we trip, but we're finding our way, and we're finding our way together, and that's the important piece. And that's really the value of Pure Esperanza and what we're trying to do, with so much more coming your way, so that we can really tap into all the ways that you can work and cultivate your own self and heal and be energized and revitalized on your journey of well-being. And look for those things coming. We always share that with you, and you can also subscribe to our monthly newsletter and see our YouTube channel and all the videos there. With this series and a few other series, we thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, thank you, Balaka. Blessings.
Thank you.
Be well, everyone.